Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give you a few more seconds before we start. Welcome to today's webinar. All righty. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for ILEA's keynote event. My name is Steve Moore, and I'm the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force with ILEA. We're excited to bring you this webinar in partnership with the professional development community. Today, we'll be presenting Rock Stars Come in All Forms, Find and Hire Diverse Talent, powered by Giants Enterprises. ILEA is proud to team up with long-term partner Giants Enterprises to create relevant, timely, and high-quality webinar content for our community as we support our industry through recovery. Giants Enterprises is dedicated to the curation and development of new ventures complementary to San Francisco's Giants franchise by delivering larger-than-life experiences to millions at Oracle Park and beyond. Giants Enterprises creates memorable events abundant with excitement, engagement, both virtually and in person, for their varied partners as well as local and international visitors. Positioned at the intersection of sports, entertainment, meetings, events, tourism, and hospitality, Giants Enterprises provides a rare combination of people, experiences, and platforms necessary to create giant impressions. Thank you again, Giant Enterprises. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We will be recording today's session, and it will be posted on the ILEA Hub. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A, and we'll try to answer them at the end of our discussion. Please share your thoughts and comments in the chat. Finally, share your experience on social media with the hashtag ILEA Webinar Wednesdays and ILEA Welcomes All. Joining our special guest today in today's conversation is Gwen McNutt, CSEP. Gwen is the Regional Internal Manager with Comcast, where she is responsible for managing communities impact initiatives, working with nonprofit organizations, and oh my gosh, sorry, Gwen, event sponsorships. Some of her key initiatives include Comcast Internet Essential Programs and an annual volunteer of service. Gwen also currently serves as the chair of the ILEA's Development Committee. Welcome, Gwen.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the ILEA Professional Development Committee, thank you so much for your time today. We're very excited to bring you today's discussion, and as with all of our educational opportunities, we hope that you come away with some new ideas, perspectives, and strategies that you can apply to your own businesses and careers. Today, our guest is Shaara Roman of the Silverine Group. Shaara is a board member, entrepreneur, and former Chief Human Resources Officer. She consults with leaders to create healthy workplaces by helping them build compelling cultures, design effective organizations, and align their people programs to meet business goals. Born in India, schooled in Nigeria and England, and having lived in Greece before coming to the US to work her way through college, Shaara is a citizen of the world. This experience has instilled a desire to build bridges between different kinds of people and propelled her to launch her business in 2016. Shaara has a deep leadership and executive experience and brings an authentic, creative, and solution-oriented approach to client engagements. Shaara is a frequent speaker on the topics of creating high-performing, authentic cultures and leaders, and winning the war for talent and women in entrepreneurship. She serves on the boards of the Arlington Soccer Association and Enabled Intelligence, and received an MBA from Georgetown University. And one final thing I want to share about Shaara before we begin is a fun anecdote she told me. When Shaara was 1 year old, she had super chubby cheeks, and she was an adorable baby. And during this time, her mother was approached in the store when she was buying baby formula, and subsequently she became a baby model. She modeled for a mule, which is the Indian equivalent to the Gerber baby. Her photo was used in pediatricians' offices and in newspapers. And the last fact I'll share about that story is that when she was a baby model, she earned more than her father did as in his management trainee job. So just from this short story, we can already see that Shaara has always been a trailblazer, and we're so excited to have you today. So thank you for joining us.
Gwen, thank you so much. Yeah.
So I've been really excited about having this conversation with you, and just trying to gain just a little bit of your knowledge. So thanks again for being here. And I just want to start with like an overview question, just kind of like why this topic? Why is this something that's important to you?
Yeah, so personally, it's really important. First, as a mom, as a woman, as an immigrant from India, a person of color, right? I'm sort of kind of those intersectionalities and more put me sort of in the thick of it myself. And I had experiences growing up overseas as a kid, and living and being educated in all those different countries, feeling welcomed, feeling like I belonged, feeling like I was included. And it was also sort of just wired in me through the way I was raised and in my childhood experiences that we are all unique and we all bring unique lived experiences, and we want to be and we thrive in environments where that can come to life. And so I experienced great instances of that as a kid. And then when I lived in India for 2 years in middle school, because I went to Nigeria, then went back and then left to go to England, that was actually a really hard time for me. And I didn't feel included and I didn't feel welcomed. And I felt very sort of, like I didn't belong, right? And so that sort of was in the back of my head. And I've worked in companies, right, where I've been able to bring my full self to the work, and there's been a focus on building inclusive culture and people being very deliberate in that organization about leveraging people's strengths and optimizing their strengths and abilities. And then I've also worked in companies where toxicity is rampant. And, and I say toxicity, meaning it's just not a great place to work. And people, whether they're diverse or even not diverse, don't feel that they're welcome. So I felt that there was this huge opportunity to really strike out on my own and help leaders build better workplace cultures so that ultimately we can all be our best selves. And that leads to a better customer or client experience. It leads to people feeling great about the work that they're doing, that they can be more connected to the purpose of the organization, and ultimately everybody wins, right? The shareholders win, the company wins, the employees win because they're thriving. And so this is sort of why it's just sort of first and foremost for me. Yep, Gwen, you're on mute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So there's so many areas to talk about when you're talking about diversity. It's this broad concept. There's so many things that, obviously differentiate us from one another, especially when you're talking about companies and diversity. And, I think, obviously when diversity is deliberate, there's several benefits that we receive, different perceptions, knowledge base, productivity, all those things happen. But, what would you say is one of the biggest benefits to organizations that source and hire diverse talent?
Yeah. So first of all, just to elaborate on what you said, diversity is more than race and gender, right? It's about people with disabilities. It's about people who live in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. It's your socioeconomic status. It's your mental health well-being, right? So there's a lot of different diversities. And what I think tends to happen, or not what I think, what I see happens in organizations is that we automatically make diversity a conversation of race or gender. And so the first thing I want people to do is to be more broad, to be more diverse in your thinking, to be more inclusive of the word diversity, and recognize that there's a lot that goes into it. So I think there's sort of two ways to look at the benefits. I know you said one, but I can never stick to the rules. So there's a business case for diversity, which everybody has been harping on, and I think the business case is really clear. You're 6 times more likely to be innovative or agile as an organization. You're 8 times more likely to have better business outcomes. You're 3 times more likely to retain millennials for more than 5 years, which is a challenge for a lot of companies. You also, if you have an hourly workforce in particular, you have a 75% decrease in sick days, and you get higher revenue. But what I really want us to be thinking about in terms of sort of what are the biggest benefits to organizations is that it's really about the moral case, right? So it's about the right thing to do. And it's about employers and companies and leaders sort of taking that stand to say, I'm not just here to make a buck. I'm here to really, maybe make a buck, but to make a buck by creating an environment where people can really thrive. And that I am going to do my best to have my organization represent the community that I live in. And if my community isn't really diverse, I'm going to work to make sure that it represents the country that we live in, which is incredibly diverse. And from a demographic perspective, it is becoming more and more diverse, right? If we look at what's happening with Gen Zs, the folks that are like 22, 23 and younger, they are diverse, right? They're multiracial, they are multi-ethnicity, they're gender fluid, they're so different. And so we need to be thinking about the moral case and the fact that everybody wants to see their thoughts and their actions heard, that they're being valued, being respected. And that's what this is really about in my mind. And that's the biggest benefit.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into to the next question, that I have for you. It's like, one of the things that I say a lot is that, people want to belong to organizations, associations, clubs, whatever it is that are reflective of them. So, and then one of the biggest barriers to attracting diversity is the lack of diversity. So, how do you, if your company is aspiring to attract diversity, but you haven't quite made it there yet, like, how do you get that buy-in from management and, sometimes employees so that there is representation at all levels? And then how do you demonstrate that to a potential candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gwen. And I always sort of believe in sort of starting with humility and starting with transparency and just being candid and saying, hey, we have taken a look and our organization isn't where it wants to be in terms of diversity, in terms of really fostering an inclusive environment. And so it's a work in progress. And quite frankly, this is a journey no matter what, right? Like, there is never an end goal. I'll sort of quote the famous RBG, right? When she was asked the question of when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there are 9. And so we want to continue to strive, right? In any event, tell people that it's a work in progress. Because you're always striving and you want to be better. And even, when I worked at Fannie Mae as an example, we, at that point, we were, top of the list for working mother, for, diversity, all of these accolades, but we kept working to be better and better because we wanted to we weren't doing it for the awards. We were doing it to really make sure that we were creating the right environment. So there's some things, how do you demonstrate that, right, to a candidate is what you ask. So first, be transparent. The second is, really be thoughtful and deliberate about your hiring process. So we tend to sort of just kind of shoot from the hip a little bit when we're hiring, especially if we're in small organizations. We sort of think like, well, I just, call up my friend Gwen and see who she knows and just bring that person down. But develop and design your hiring process so that it's consistent. When you're doing interviews, almost have a script so that you can be really clear and thoughtful and remind yourself of what are the things that I want to say that I'm saying to every candidate, whether it is about the opportunity, whether it is about sort of the culture I'm trying to create. and be welcoming, right? Because it's really easy often to be welcoming with people that we connect with, right? The moment I hear someone's from Georgetown, I automatically am like, oh yeah, they're cool people, right? Because they had a similar experience to me. Well, we want to be that way with everybody that we're coming into contact with. So if you're consistent and you actually have a structured hiring process, that drives you to do that. The second thing in terms of kind of the demonstrating it to a potential candidate is really be aware of your unconscious bias, right? Like, be mindful of it. We all have bias, every single one of us. And if you don't believe me, go to the Harvard Implicit Bias site, and you can check your bias on many, many fronts, right? And so think about, what are the assumptions you're making? Do you ask easier questions because you somehow connect with someone and you're like, oh yeah, I could go have a beer or a glass of wine with them, and you kind of tend to relax, right? You know, we all tend to gravitate towards candidates that have similar experiences. Also, be deliberate about the notion of culture add versus culture fit. So again, when you're talking to a potential candidate and when you're thinking about the role and you're thinking about who you want to bring on your team, think about it in terms of, what is the value they're going to add to my culture? How are they going to be additive versus sort of fitting in? Because fitting in is often like more of the same, as opposed to, hey, wait a second, this person is bringing a different experience, and that's what I wanna do. The other piece I want you to just think about, right, from a statistics perspective, there was a study done by Catalyst organization last year, and they found that 40% of women anticipate gender bias. And that is relative to 26% of men. So when you're dealing with a potential candidate, just remember, if they're a woman, and the same statistic holds very similar numbers for people of color. So if you're talking to a woman, you're talking to a person of color, you're talking to a woman who's a person of color, right? Just know that in their head, they're already on guard that you're asking a question or you're creating an experience that might already alienate them. So you have to kind of go above and beyond to create that environment that makes them show that you are walking the talk in terms of your commitment to diversity and inclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, so once you've created that environment, you've got the buy-in, you have to do the recruitment, right? So, you said earlier, diversity is the right thing to do. Obviously, it's a smart thing to do. But, when you get to that, how do I do it? It's sometimes confusing. It's sometimes difficult for people. So what strategies can you give us to help people attract diverse candidates? And then, just some tangible examples of things that people can do.
So I think, one thing is, in terms of a sourcing strategy is, first of all, just the way you write your job description is an important thing to be thinking about, right? Is your job description inclusive? Are you actually sort of creating are you putting words in there that you do have a diversity statement? Are you being really clear about what you're sort of actually looking to do? And if you're sharing your benefits, for example, on your website, do you have benefits that actually work for people that might not be sort of in a majority community, right? So things like childcare, things like mental health care, whatever it might be, right? So think about it from that perspective. In terms of actually sort of sourcing and, bringing candidates in, I always sort of believe when you're dealing with recruiting, you want to be thinking about recruiting before you actually have a need. So to the best of your ability, and I understand if you're a small company, I mean, like I'm a small business, right? It's hard. But when you meet people and you are out there in the world, you sort of really want to be thinking about, hey, how do I really cultivate this relationship with this person? Maybe they can come work with me one day. Maybe we can partner together. Maybe they can be a client, right? Think about people in that context all of the time and be building your pipeline. But there's so much information out on the internet, right? You can target, first of all, target sources like historically Black colleges and universities. Get to know, if you have them in your area, if you're sort of more of a local organization, get to know if there's one nearby, right? Or find one that you can build a relationship with that might have a program that puts out communications folks, or puts out, you know, event planners, or, you know, hospitality, or whatever it is, right? But build relationships, and use their career programs that they have. Look for certain groups, affinity groups on LinkedIn. Like if you just search, you know, Black engineers or Hispanic accountants or whatever, there's like all these different groups that are going to pop up. And obviously you need to sort through them, because, you know, it feels like there's an app for everything and there's a group for everything, right? But there's, for every functional area, there is some sort of a resource for you that is out there. So you want to make sure that you're posting on the HBCUs, you know, color comm. So for example, communications and marketing professionals, there's a website, a community, you know, called Color Comm. Go there. If you're hiring MBAs, if you're hiring accountants, if you're hiring Black women, you're hiring tech people, if you're hiring executive leaders, I know all people are always like, oh, how do I actually bring leaders in? These are all organizations that exist for the sole purpose of advancing Black people. And there are similar ones for Hispanics, or similar ones for Asian Americans, right? So you need to invest the time. It's not going to just happen. Like, you actually have to do some work and plan it and be deliberate. And if you can think about it before you need it, that would be the best thing. Some of it will be hit or miss, right? Something that might work for me or for you, Gwen, may not work for somebody else. So you've got to really do trial by error, and you can't just sort of give up and say, well, I tried. I sent it to Howard University and I get no responses. Well, yeah, because they're like, who the heck are you, right? I've never seen you. Who are you? What is this company? They go to your website, they see, you know, all white men, and it's a Black woman or a trans woman, and she's kind of like, well, I don't want to work there. I don't see like I fit, right? So you've got to cultivate. If you know people of color, or in your business as clients, however you know them, through your place of worship, ask for referrals, right? Say, hey, I'm really working hard to increase diversity in my organization, and I want to bring in a really diverse slate. Who do you know? Let me know. Let me talk to them. Go to networking events, go to virtual events. Again, target, like, where do I think that this is worth my time, and where do I want to cultivate a relationship? And start to do those types of things. So those, I mean, it's a lot of things I kind of put out there, but you know, hopefully there's a nugget or two that sort of strikes a chord with folks that they can go and pursue in terms of strategies to attract and source talent.
Yeah, all important ways, and all great ways to source talent. What I was interested in learning about too is, you know, there are those people that really want to you know, recruit diverse talent, but, you know, maybe they don't know where to look, so you gave them some strategies for that. But what about those people that live in a diverse area that has little diversity? You know, do you have any tips for recruiting, you know, diverse candidates, and for those people who might want to work at a diverse organization but live in an area that has little diversity?
Yeah, so two great questions there. You know, I think one thing I would say, that if you're in an organization where there isn't a lot of diversity, you know, think about having some grace in your positions. And actually this applies really for any job, because so much through my career, when I you know, was dealing with managers that were hiring, and even now as clients, you know, we write these job descriptions with like expecting, you know, this unicorn, and there are no unicorns. So, and so think about, you know, do I really need to have all these requirements? You know, where can I really flex a little bit? Where can I have some grace? And that's where kind of the equity component comes in, right? So of course, we want to hire the most qualified. And I am not saying that you have to like lower your standard. Having grace is not lowering your standard. It's actually sort of saying, let me widen the aperture and let me really think about what is absolutely necessary to do this job, and what can I train on the job, and how can I bring in someone who might have less experience but might have experience in a different area, and actually that's going to add more value to this, right? So be kind of creative in that space, and sort of think about it in, you know, from that perspective. You know, I mentioned kind of earlier, you know, kind of this whole notion of culture add versus culture fit. So think about how people can bring different value to your organization and enrich you in a way that you hadn't thought about before, that actually makes your group better. You know, one of the things is that as individuals, like, we don't always have the perfect blend of skills and experiences and everything, right? But our job as a leader, as a manager, is to build kind of the complete team. So if we think about it, that we're all kind of coming together like a little jigsaw puzzle and sort of being pieced together, then you can sort of look at it in a different way, than rather than thinking, oh, I need, you know, 6 perfect people to make up this team. No, I can have 6 imperfect people and actually have a beautiful, highly functioning team. Job descriptions, you know, when you think about developing, I mentioned it really quickly earlier, if you create an inclusive job description, think about the types of terminology that you're using. Avoid terms like ninja, you know, stealth, dominate. Really think about what must you have, what must you not have. Don't use jargon. Like, try to write it in a way that an 8th grader can understand. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean dumb it down, but just simplify the language, right? We all kind of go into our speak, whatever that happens to be. Make sure you emphasize your diversity, your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I mentioned this earlier too, like, if you have benefits like parental leave and childcare subsidies, you know, make sure that those types of things are put in, because again, that will continue to attract the diverse talent. I'm sure a lot of people know this, but I will just state it as well. For the men out there, when men read a job description, when they see like 50-60% of the stuff they can do, they're like, I can do that, I'm going to submit my resume, right? For women, and I don't know if the statistics have been done for people of color, but for women, we want to see that we can do everything. So just those mindsets, right? Like, if you're trying to attract more diversity, if you remember the other statistic I shared, if 4 out of 10 people of color are walking around feeling like, I got to be on guard, they're not going to apply for something that they feel like they can't meet 100%. So you've got to give some grace in that process. You asked the question, Gwen, about if you want to work in a diverse company and there isn't one. I don't know, maybe it's that you have to move. Maybe, I mean, I don't know if the candidate is a diverse candidate themselves. But, you know, maybe if you are diverse and the company is not diverse, you know, maybe you try to come as a pair. You know, look for a couple of jobs, find a friend to come and apply with you. But, you know, I think true to your values and staying true to who you are and kind of the type of organization is important. And, you know, if you're not finding it where you are, then maybe you have to move. I don't know if that's answering your question or if you want to give me more clarity.
No, I just, you know, just in case, like, you know, because we have business owners and we have people who, you know, are, you know, working in the industry. So if they just had, you know, a question about, you know, what they could do to
yeah,
sort of help. So you touched on like leadership roles a little bit earlier, but I specifically in the events industry, you know, we have varying levels of diversity, you know, mostly found in the front line. So, you know, you're talking like hotel and, you know, those types of businesses. But, you know, when you reach the management levels, you know, they're higher, you know, diversity is really limited. So, you know, how do you advise someone who's looking to recruit diverse candidates into leadership roles? How, like, what would be your advice, you know, for, you know, event industry people that really want to change that landscape?
Yeah, so another great question here. So whenever you're sort of looking at really bringing in talent, and particularly bringing in diverse talent or underrepresented talent, I always think having a buy and build strategy is a good one, right? And so what I mean by that is buying talent means you're going out to the market and you're recruiting people who are not currently in your organization and you're inviting them in. Right. And then building talent is about cultivating talent and grooming talent and helping them grow their career in your organization. So, you know, a lot of, I think, what I said earlier in terms of kind of widening that aperture can sort of, you know, sort of fall into, can be used here, be followed here. You know, look for where to advertise for your industry, right? Like I did a quick thing, and I know H Careers, for example, is one, right? So if you're not using that type of a site, go out there. Again, you know, you're going to have your inclusive job descriptions. You're going to have kind of a structured recruiting process. So you're going to do that for these higher level positions too. It might be that you need to invest in a search partner, a recruiting partner that can commit to bringing you a diverse slate, because they will have much more expertise, much more knowledge. So if you have a senior level, a director, a VP, you know, senior VP, whatever those roles might be, you should maybe look then to a recruiting partner to help you do that. And you should ask for, show me your statistics, right? Let me know how you uncover diverse slates. What do you do, et cetera. So that, and I mentioned too, right, like Black MBAs, you know, there's the Executive Council of Leadership, right? Again, find those organizations that have leaders, and again, they may not have all the specific experience in your industry. So again, think about what's really important that I need them to do, right? If I need them to really motivate and inspire and lead people, and they can learn some of the business aspects, then I've just doubled or tripled my pool of candidates, right? In terms of building the talent kind of internally, you know, that's where you can think about career development. You can think about succession programs. And again, depending on your size of your organization, you can sort of, you know, really create a framework to say, you know, in 12 months or in 18 months, I want to be able to promote X number of people from my hospitality staff. And, you know, they're entry level, they've been doing their jobs. Let me figure out how to get them 1 or 2 levels up. And what are the skills and traits and things they need to learn to get there? And again, for example, you might have someone who is in your housekeeping staff, right? Or lower down in sort of the organization structure. Maybe English isn't their first language. So maybe they need some help learning English. Maybe they, you know, because English isn't their first language, they have not had a lot of experience presenting in front of people. So if that becomes like an important part of that next level role, how do you build them give them those skills? How do you give them small assignments that are little stretches that give them confidence, give them experience, give them confidence, give them success, gives them visibility, and then you build from there. So the build strategy is going to take you time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. And you have to, again, be very deliberate about it and make sense of your organization and what you can and can't do. If you're bringing in talent from the outside, you can be very deliberate and say, this is what I'm going to do. And I have to see a diverse slate. And you might say, you know what, my leadership team is all white. And out of 10 people, I have, 2 women, and I have 8 men. And so this one opening that I have, I actually wanted to be a diverse candidate. And so that's what I'm putting down in the ground. I really want to look for the most qualified, diverse candidates. And that's okay to do because you really want to round out your team, and you know that that diversity coming in is going to enrich the team and enrich the organization.
So if you're what if you're not the decision maker, but you still think that diversity is important, and maybe you want to be one of the people that's in the pipeline in the future? How do you bring that to your leadership so that they're making diversity a priority? What do you say to them?
Well, I mean, if you're, you can share the statistics with them, right? In terms of the business case, the moral case, in terms of the diversity. If you are an employee and you're not someone who's in a hiring position, you can refer diverse candidates to your organization. And you can encourage your friends, encourage, diverse applicants to apply. If you are a people manager and you have one or two positions, I mean, you can start to make change yourself, right? Like you can focus on the jobs that you're filling. You can engage in discussion. You can just go talk to the CEO and say, hey, I've been noticing something. I just want to ask a question, like, what's our plan? What's our thought? I worked at this company and here's some of the advantages that we saw. Hey, I've noticed that we have a diverse slate, it might be 50-50, and yet we kind of end up with the same prototype on our sales team, right? Like, sales teams happen to have a model, and they all sort of look and feel like this, and they could be very, very young or whatever. And so you can sort of, if you feel safe, right, start to have those conversations. But the best thing that you can do is to bring applicants into the pool, right, and to start to bring those qualified people forward.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about, kind of diversity being this broad concept and attracting and recruiting. So let's talk about interviewing. You said before that people bring their conscious and their unconscious bias to whatever they're doing. We want to, make sure that, we know that we're going to bring those into the interviews when we have interviews, but, when you're hiring candidates, what are your thoughts on bringing, assembling like a diverse interview panel or something like that, that includes, groups with varying backgrounds and perspectives? Does it work? What are your thoughts?
For sure. Absolutely, it works. And I love it when companies do panels. And whether it's a panel or whether it's just making sure that as the person goes through the interview process that they get to meet, a diverse slate, someone who's been there, someone who's new, someone who's been there a really long time, someone who's a colleague, someone who's in a different department, right? So they get a full experience of that organization. Because when organizations are really when they're intentional about their culture and they're intentional about creating inclusion, everybody in the organization has that same experience. I've experienced, and I'm sure many of the folks on this webinar have experienced, companies where their boss might be fabulous, their team might be fabulous, they might have a lot of diversity, a lot of inclusion, a lot of like great stuff happening, but God forbid you have to go work for another manager, or your manager leaves and someone else comes in and everything kind of goes haywire because there isn't that consistency. So absolutely, cast as wide a net as you can, while also being mindful that you don't want to have, someone meet 12, like have them go through 12 interviews, right? That's exhausting as well. So panel interviews are a good way to do that, right? To get like a mix of 3 or 4 people. So it's one interview, but they're getting to meet different folks. And, I've been a part of panel interviews a lot. And actually I've done a lot. And it's very interesting because you will have different people pick up different things and look at the way someone is telling a story or sharing their experience in a different way. And it can actually make or break a candidate. And I have been working with a client just recently where, you know, we had a couple of those situations where clients were, candidates were sort of moved on to the next round because there was a diverse set of interviewers really listening to what they were saying and how they were saying it. So that's what that value adds as well. So do it.
Panel interviews can be stressful. But
they can, but they can also be like a meet and greet, right? So you can also be thoughtful about how you set it up. And it could be, hey, we want you to just meet some peers from across the organization. And, you know, this is your chance to sort of really get to know. I mean, of course, we can't do lunches now, right? But that used to be sort of a nice way to kind of, yes, an interview, of course, you gotta, you know, be there, but you're breaking bread together and you can sort of get to know people a little bit more personally. A little harder to do right now, especially don't want to be having lunch interviews on Zoom or lunch meetings on Zoom. That would be not so good.
Yeah. So let's talk about money for a second.
Yes.
Yeah. So women, I have a couple of statistics for you. So women and people of color, you know, I'm sure you already know this, are being paid less than their white male counterparts.
No.
It's shocking.
Something like 70 cents, 50 cents on the dollar. Yeah. I've heard that. I thought it was the other way, but okay. Anyway.
So for everybody out there, so if you're a white female, you're paid 79 cents for every dollar that a white male makes. If you're Black, it's 63. If you're Native American, it's 60. If you're Latina, it's 55. Asian women are the highest paid minority, you know, people of color group at 87 cents, but it's still less than white male counterparts. You know, how do we recognize that this is a problem and address this pay gender gap?
Well, I just have to say, Gwen, that if people don't recognize it's a problem after all of these statistics, I do think that that's a whole other conversation, and they might need to go get a checkup. But you know, so if you're recruiting candidates, talent into your organization, first of all, do not ask, and it is illegal in some states to ask for current salary. So that's the first kind of equalizer. So again, no matter your size of organization, you should have kind of a pay band. You should have a salary band. You should have an understanding of what the job or multiple jobs are worth in the market. And then that's what you decide to pay for that job. So if you have a single incumbent, right, and the job is open, then it's kind of a little easy. You know that the average pay is 100,000, and you know that you're going to pay anywhere between 95 and 105, right? That would be sort of a reasonable thing to do, and you don't ask what that person is making. You basically pay them what that job is worth, and you sort of say, wow, well, this person is coming with a lot of experience from a direct competitor. And you know, while they've only been doing this 7 years, and I really was looking for 7 to 10, they're going to hit the ground running. And so, you know what? I'm going to pay them 105. But they could have been making 50. They could have been making 200. It's up to them to decide, is that a fair wage for the job? And so that's one thing, right? I talked about sort of benchmarking the pay. That is super important for organizations to have kind of a compensation structure, even if they're a small company, like have a sense of what your pay structure looks like. And then look at how you're paying people in your organization. Look at the trends, right? Try to, I mean, some of it, you know, obviously if it's very big and very complex, you want to outsource that to a compensation expert, et cetera. But you can even just do a simple assessment of what do my salary increases look like, right? Who is getting the highest amounts? Let me look at my women and see how they're being paid relative to the men in my organization for a similar job. and it is not just, you know, the AV tech to the AV tech, right? There are a whole bunch of jobs that might be in that space. So you want to look across the board. And same thing with sort of people of color, right? We have those demographics in our HR systems, hopefully. And you can sort of look at it from that perspective. So we have to be vigilant about it. And when we think about equity, right? Equity is not equality. Equity is about making sure that if someone has been underrepresented or underserved or underpaid, that we actually give them more to boost them up, to catch up to where they need to be. So it might be that the white guy doesn't get a pay raise because you only have a limited amount of money, right? And you're saying, well, you know what? You've actually been overpaid relative to other individuals in the organization for 3 years. And so I'm going to hold your pay. Or I'm going to really give you, I'll give you a very, very small increase, or maybe I'll give you a lump sum bonus, right? There'll be other ways to kind of compensate you. But my commitment is to bring people, up. You also want to look at performance, right? So what we do is, well, you know, but Joe's a high performer. He gets 5 out of 5. And, you know, well, Shaara and Gwen, well, you know, they're always late to work because they got to take care of their kids. Well, who's going to take care of the kids if the moms don't, right? Like, you want the kids fending for themselves. So why is Joe getting 5s? And let's really dig into why Shaara and Gwen are not getting 5s. And is there some bias built into our performance management system? And the answer almost always is yes. There is bias built into our performance system. And so it perpetuates. So you need to look at all of those pieces that are feeding in. Who are we promoting, right? Let's look at our slate of promotions. If it's, again, all, you know, and we're picking on the white men, but you know, if it sort of looks one way versus another, you need to just really be mindful of, do I have a diverse slate of people that are eligible for promotion? And then what am I doing with those people that are eligible? So it is actually being analytical about the data that you have. I know some organizations might not have, you know, sort of the HR experts there, but, you know, somewhere in the organization, there is an analyst, you know, sitting in your finance team or something, or you find a consultant to help you do that work, right? But that is an important commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, so first I want to remind anybody, if they have a question, to put it in the Q&A, so that we can get to one or two of those. I have a couple more questions for you. First, I just wanted to find out if, you know, if you have any resources for people, like if there's, you know, if they want to, you know, dig deeper, you know, than we were able to go into today, do you have any specific resources that you can direct us to?
So I don't know about specific resources for like hiring diverse talent per se, but, you know, there are some books that are, definitely kind of top of the list that folks have probably heard about by now, but I'll put them out there, and then you can certainly look at them. There's not only the books, but there's podcasts. They've been, you know, many of the authors have been interviewed. There's a lot of blogs that are out there. So so certainly all of those are possibilities. So a couple of these are a few of my favorites. So one is Blind Spot, and the other is Thinking Fast and Slow. And so both of those are really kind of dealing with sort of the unconscious bias component and how our brain is wired, and you know, just allows you to sort of learn more. I mentioned the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, the IAT. It's not a test, assessment, and that is a way for you to kind of learn about who you are, right? And again, we all have bias, you know. You and I, Gwen, have biases. I've gone and done them and gone like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I knew that, but I didn't really know that. I didn't want to admit it, but now here it is in black and white. White Fragility is a great book. The New Jim Crow, Stamped from the Beginning. You know, those two, for me as an immigrant, not having been raised here, but living in a country like Nigeria, right, where everyone around me was Black, they were African, right? I grew up with Black leaders, Black doctors, Black teachers, right? Like, so for me, I don't understand what happened, or I didn't understand the situation in this country. And so what has been very enlightening, just personally for me, certainly over the last sort of 6-8 months, has been really understanding or learning about the systemic racism that exists here, right? The systemic biases against women. And so these are not things that we are going to easily, like quickly, kind of just with a snap of a finger overcome. So some of these books sort of really help us understand that, and hopefully it just kind of widens the, sort of widens the lens, widens the amount of information that you have to sort of say, oh wow, what can we do? What can I do personally to make a difference, right? To help my fellow human, because that's what it's about. So those are some. Of course, you're welcome to come to my website and sign up, because we do, we have newsletters and we do webinars and things like that. So we can certainly keep you apprised of things as well. So yeah, so those are some ideas.
So for my final question for you today, what would be your call to action for people who want to increase, hiring diversity levels in the events industry? What can we take away today to make a change?
Yeah. So, the one thing I would say is whoever you are, whether you're a leader and you're hiring, or whether you're a team member and you're not hiring, is go and research and investigate a new organization where you can either network, where you can, a college you can start a relationship with. One action that you can take to cultivate diverse relationships. And you're going to start small. So don't try to boil the ocean, but just go and make that commitment that is the relationship. That's what you're going to work, because you want to start before you absolutely need to, right? It's kind of like planting a tree. You plant a tree today, but it's really for tomorrow. And that's what this is really about. Yes, there's certainly things we can do today, but you also want to cultivate for the future.
Don't try to boil the ocean. I'm going to use that saying now. I like that. So I have a question in the Q&A here.
Yeah.
It is from an anonymous attendee. It says, how do you deal with diversity and inclusion in a company where leadership has a continuous bias and does not see the issue?
Well, look, if someone doesn't, if you have leaders that don't see the issue, then you can share some facts with them. You can share some stories with them, but ultimately, if they don't see it, there's some people who have a different perspective, and all I can say is that you give it your shot. And if they're not going to make a move, then you have to decide if that's the place that you want to be in. I don't have a magic wand, right? Like, you can't force people to admit that there's an issue. You can't force people to think that they're not going to have harm, or that they're not going to lower their standard, or whatever story they have. But you can invite a conversation. You can ask them to say, well, help me understand why you think that way. Or, can I tell you about my experience when I worked here or there? And if you feel like ultimately that's not shifting the dial, then, you have a decision to make, right? We can't fix everyone. We can't fix people and organizations that don't want to change.
Yeah.
Not a great answer.
Well, it's just reality though. So
yeah.
So that's well, we are running close to our time. I wanted to say thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you've been able to bring us. So thank you, Shaara Roman of the Silver Ring Group. We appreciate your insights, and thank everybody for joining us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Steve to close us out for today.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you, Shari. I mean, this was amazing. I learned so much sitting here. I've got a paper full of notes. So thank you for joining us. Thanks again to Giant Enterprises, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Please join us next week, November 4th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time for our upcoming webinar, Broadening Your Value Proposition, the role and importance of supplier diversity and procurement. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.